All right, welcome to confirmation class. This is session number 4, and today we are going to be talking about law. Just a quick recap as we go through all of the sessions. The first time we got together, we talked about creation, that God created the world, that He created it good, that He took something that was chaotic and brought order, and then we said, okay, the world is not that way now. We know there's chaos out there. Why? And we talked about the fall and how Adam and Eve kind of messed it up by eating the fruit because they wanted to be like what?
God.
They wanted to be like God. Which of course we know that we can't. Our human minds are too small to be able to do that. Last time we talked about how God said, okay, if you want to do it all alone, you want to be left to your own devices, I'll let you do it. And the result of that was a return to chaos, a return to violence, and so God said, I can't have this, I'm going to have to basically start over, since the great flood wiped everything clean. So we get to kind of the part in Scripture, there's a big part of the story between where we left off last time with Noah and kind of where we're going to start today. It goes through God choosing a particular people that He is going to bless to be a blessing. I'm not going to cover that part in depth. Maybe do that in the next year or something like that. But what we need to start dealing with is, okay, God knows that we cannot go it alone because we can't tell what is right and wrong on our own. So how is God going to help us? How is God going to help us know what is right, what is wrong? And I start off with a really interesting place. Some of you have already looked at the questions ahead and you saw the term baby jail. Now, what baby jail was, when my kids were little, when they started toddling, crawling around, we were given a plastic deal that we added extra things for, and this thing looked kind of like this. It stood about maybe 2.5 feet tall.
Were they smart enough to open a hatch?
There was no hatch.
Oh.
It was complete. There was no gates or anything else like that.
Were they smart enough to flip it over and get out?
They couldn't flip it over and get out. It was too big and too bulky for them to do that.
You think we could?
So we would stick them in there. Baby jail. That's what we called it. But, you know, the reason we put them in there was why?
They're being bad kids.
No, they weren't being bad kids.
Oh.
No, they weren't being bad kids at all. Okay, if you look around this room right here and you think about a baby who is learning to crawl, what are they going to look at? What is that little baby going to look at? What are they going to crawl to?
Everything. Poison.
Everything. Anything. Everything. They're going to stick their fingers in all types of openings. They're going to grab anything they can. And guess what where toddlers stick things?
Their nose.
Oh.
Their mouth.
Their mouth, immediately. So, I mean, crawling around here, oh look, glue. What do you think them toddlers are going to do?
Up their nose.
Grab it, try to stick it in their mouth, everything else like that. These noodles that are painted right here, they're going to try to grab them and stick them in their mouth. That's what toddlers do. So as a parent, I'm looking at my house. And yes, I try to clean it up, I try to keep things put away and stuff like that. But I got television set, I've got electrical outlets, there's extension cords and stuff like that, there's computer stuff, we have the dogs in there. So there's all kinds of stuff all over the place. And guess what those kids are going to try to do with that?
Eat it.
Eat it. They're going to get into it. They're going to mess with it. They may stick their finger into a light socket, everything else. How can I make sure my kids are safe? And so you may think, okay, they're being this is punishment for them. No, it wasn't punishment. It was trying to keep them safe and make sure they did not get into things and get hurt. Now, baby jail, as we called it, there's another word for it.
Boundaries.
Boundaries. Boundaries are very, 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 very important. We all have them. And we have them at school, we have them in our daily lives, we have boundaries right now. In fact, most of the time when people get into conflict with one another, when people fight, it's because
Boundaries.
they don't recognize the boundaries. So if I go step on Braden's foot,
It's Jordan's.
that's a boundary violation right there.
You don't step on someone's Jordan's.
Oh, no, you don't. You know, but you're right. But that's not the only boundary, because in some ways, if I was a stickler for things, Callan, you would have just stepped on a class boundary that says do not talk when the teacher's talking. You see. Well, I'm not dissing you, because I don't mind the interruptions and talk like that, because I want your interaction. I want y'all to hang with me. It's very important. But even on our skin has boundaries, and what happens if germs get through the boundary?
You can get your hand cut off because of something, I don't know what it's
MRSA, those kind of
Infections.
things. Yeah, infections, those kind of things. When you have boundary violations, generally bad things happen. And so one of the things that we have to do as parents, that we have to do in society, is we have to teach people boundaries, because we do not naturally come with boundaries.
Do this homework.
Right. He's listening and filling in the blank. That's fine. He's learning, he's writing and doing things. That's fine. But as kids, we do not automatically come with a set of boundaries up here. How do you know now what is right and wrong? How do you know what the rules are?
Someone teaches you.
You learn.
Someone teaches you.
Oh.
And in fact, I have a quote in there from some very famous counselors, psychologists,
Dr. Cloud and
Dr. Cloud and Townsend, and they talk about how kids do not automatically have boundaries. And the other part about it is, and we're going to get into this in a little bit, is even when we define the boundaries, and even when we put the boundaries out there, guess what we like to do with those boundaries?
Test them.
Test them, push them, break them. Why? Well, we'll get to that in a minute. But, again, why was the boundary put there? Why did we put baby jail there?
To keep
them safe.
And so what motivated us to put our kids in there?
Safety.
Yeah, right, say it again. I love my kids. I don't want my kids to get hurt. Why do we have the rules? Why do we have regulations? Why do we have boundaries that get put up there? Is it because people are trying to limit our, freedom and make us angry and keep our development down? Is that why we have the rules and stuff? No. Basically, society has boundaries to say within those boundaries you are safe. Within those boundaries you are secure. It's when you start stepping outside those boundaries that you have problems. So, when you're within the boundaries, everything is cool. When you step out of them, that's when you have problems. Now, with that background, we now start and turn to God and His people. And the story picks up now with the book called Exodus. And the reason it's called Exodus is because of a long series of historical events. God's people, the Israelites, were slaves under the Egyptians. Long story there about how they were freed, but long and short of it, God taught the Egyptians a lesson, kind of punished them for not treating the Israelites well, and the Israelites were freed. And when they were freed from slavery, they left or exited, which our word exit comes from exodus, leave, to get out.
That was a vocabulary word to use.
Cool. I hope I got it right, to leave.
Yeah.
Really? Yeah. So the Israelites left. They took off and they headed towards the promised land. But there was a long journey through the desert and so on and so forth to get there. And it ended up being longer than it needed to be, but there was a reason behind that. The Israelites were traveling, they escaped the Egyptians, they escaped when the Egyptian army came after them, God provided a miracle, opened up the Red Sea, they were able to cross. They then came to a mountain called Mount Sinai. And on that mountain, God had Moses, who was the leader of the Israelites, come up onto the mountain, and God gave them the law. And the basic summary of the law is the Ten Commandments. And you have that actually in your lesson. You have the Ten Commandments there, and your assignment when you get home is to read through Exodus chapter 20 and write down the commands as you see them presented there in the Scripture. If you don't get 10, that's all right. Just write down the ones that are there. We'll show you how they're broken down at a later date. But God gave them the Ten Commandments. Why was it necessary for God to give them rules when they were coming out of that situation that they came out of before? Why do you think? Put yourself to begin with in the mind of a slave. Do you have any freedom?
No.
Who tells you when to eat?
Mom does.
The master does. Who tells you when to go to work?
Master.
Who tells you when you can go home?
Master.
Who tells you what you can and can't do?
Master.
So if you're a slave, your entire life is ordered.
Yep.
Your entire life is governed by somebody else. So do you ever learn to make your own decisions? Do you ever learn to make, what the boundaries really are? Not on your own. Not if you're in that kind of slavery. And if all of a sudden you went from being enslaved, where somebody was telling you what to do, how to do it, when to do it, everything else, all of a sudden you went from that kind of arrangement to absolute freedom, what would that do to your system?
Make you happy.
Mess it all up.
It might make you happy, but it would mess you up. And believe me, when I went to college, there was this one gal who she lasted one semester, and the reason she did is because her parents had given her that kind of lifestyle. They weren't mean, they weren't doing it, to be bad, but they were basically protecting her. They were telling her what to do, taking care of her schedule, making sure she got up when she needed to get up, went to school when she needed to go to school, making sure she got her homework done. So they were constantly hovering above her, telling her, this is what you do, this is how you do it, this is what you do, this is how you do it, and so on and so forth. When she got to college and was absolutely free, guess what happened to her? She freaked out. She had absolute freedom. She didn't know how to manage her time. She didn't know how to manage boundaries. She didn't know how to make sure she could have plenty of time to do her homework and classwork and everything else like that. She ran around with a bunch of guys because, it was like, oh wow, I'm totally free. Nobody's looking over my shoulder to tell me to do anything. All of a sudden to go from absolute bondage and slavery to total freedom caused her to freak out. Because she didn't know. She didn't know the rules. She didn't know how to handle those kind of things. Now, your parents, hopefully, as you are going through life, are teaching you how to be a time manager. They're teaching you right from wrong. They're teaching you how to handle yourself. Because a parent's ideal job is to prepare you to leave the house. Which means when you walk out the door to be on your own, you know how to manage life. You know how to manage your wallet. You know how to manage your calendar. You know how to do all of those things. And a parent who does not teach their kids to do that is not a very good parent at all. Now, translate that into an entire community of people, an entire community that has been enslaved, told what to do, at every juncture. All of a sudden they have absolute freedom. No one's telling them what to do. No one's telling them how to live. No one's telling them and giving them their food or telling them when to go to bed or anything else like that or how to work. The scene was ripe for chaos. And so God takes them, leads them to Mount Sinai, and he says, okay people, here are the basics. Here are the basic ways you live with one another, you live with me, and you go through life. These are the basics. And of course the first one was, I am the Lord your God, you shall have no other gods before me. The second one was, I am the Lord your God, you shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. Honor the Sabbath to keep it holy. Honor your father and your mother. You shall not steal, you shall not kill, you shall not commit adultery. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. You shall not covet anything that is your neighbor's, want anything that is your neighbor's. So God is listing out all of these things that say, okay, this is how you live together. This is how you work in the world. Stay inside these boundaries and you're going to be just fine. Go outside of them, we're going to have a problem. So God outlines all of this to Moses on the mountaintop. Moses comes down. He tells the people, these are the rules. These are how things is. And a very, very important thing that Moses starts out with, that God starts out with, that we always have to remember about God. The way Exodus chapter 20 starts, and you can read it, and you can see if I can quote it accurately. The way it starts, God says, I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of slavery So essentially God says, this is what I have done for you. I have already done something for you. I have already given you freedom. Now do this. This is a very, very important thing to see, because God always acts first before he asks us to do something. Most of the other world religions and everything else like that say, in order to get God to pay attention to you, in order to get God to love you, in order to get God to take care, first you need to do this. Then God will take care of you. Christianity works the exact opposite. God always acts first. God does the things for us, shows us love, brings us freedom, and then he says, do this. So if you ever go out there, if you ever hear me say, okay, you have to do this in order to make God happy, if you ever hear another preacher say, Christianity means you have to do this, you have to be great, you have to be kind, you have to be loving, you have to love your neighbor as yourself and everything else, and then God will appreciate you. You look them right in the eye and say, you're wrong. That's not Christianity. God acts first, then he asks us to do this. The giving of the Ten Commandments, same thing. God acts, and then he says, do this. Now, everything sounds really good, right? Mm-hmm. If you want to be safe, if you want to have a fulfilled life, if you want to be right with God and right with one another, all you got to do is follow the law. Sounds good, right? Mm-hmm. Sounds like it's pretty good news. Sounds like everything's hunky-dory, right? Is there a problem with this? There is a problem with this. Call this human nature. Back in the garden, was the desire to be like God, which was not to imitate God, was it? It was more the desire to be God, to call our own shots, to do our own things. Which means when it comes to the boundaries, I said earlier, what do we tend to do with them?
Cross them.
Cross them, push them, manipulate them. In fact, here was God taking the people out of Egypt into the wilderness, promising to take them to the promised land. He gave them the Ten Commandments, and the first one was, remember what I said? I am the Lord your God.
Don't have any other gods.
Don't have any other gods. That's the first one, okay?
And then,
After God gave them that rule, everybody said, we will follow this, we will let God be God, we will do this. Moses goes up on the mountain. He's up on the mountain 40 days. Guess what the people do? You're right, right? They go crazy. They make, and I am not an artist in any way, shape, or form, so you can laugh your head off at this.
is that a cow?
That's a cow, yes.
Where's
It's a
this
very
Don't say I
abstract.
think it's a
Where's
cat.
its tail?
It's right there.
Don't be so rude.
You gotta know.
I put
It
eyes
looks
and
like
noses
a
on it.
longhorn. Where's its head?
Might just be. The people made a golden calf, and they stood up and said, this is your God who brought you out of Egypt. So, 40 days, and the people went from saying they would follow God, the true God, to constructing their own God and worshiping it instead.
Isn't that what the
Why?
Chinese do, kind of?
There's different, the Hindus have idols and stuff like that, so yes,
Okay.
yes, Lawson, you have a question.
Golden
It was a golden calf. It was a golden calf. You know, Moses came back down off the mountain. He got really, really ticked off, and he was like, "Okay, this is not good. You people are way out of line." He took the calf, busted it up, broke it, ground it up into dust, and forced the people to drink it. And eat it. I mean,
Oh, God.
it's like he was sick. Yes, read.
Weren't they like partying or something?
Oh yeah, they were having a big party and
Okay,
everything else
I
like
heard
that.
something about that.
Oh yeah, they had all this.
They actually heard him like speaking to Moses, and they're like, "Oh, let's make our own God."
They heard the thunder on the mountain and everything else, so they were terrified of it. But you
Didn't
know,
they think Moses was dead?
they thought Moses, but it was dead. And here is the kicker. And here's the thing about the law. Now, there are two reasons you follow the law. There are two reasons you do. The first is because, whoops. You know it's right. And you want to please the one who gave it. That's the first reason. That's the one we try to motivate people to follow the law by. Because you're not following the law to get any reward, you're not following the law because you're afraid of punishment, you're not following the law for any other reason other than it's the right thing to do, and you have a tremendous respect for the one who gave you the law. This is an example I like to use because it fits. If you are married to someone and you love that person beyond a shadow of a doubt, will you go date somebody else?
Yeah.
Why?
What?
Because you love her.
Because you love her. And if you do, if you break that boundary, what's it going to do?
You get divorced and a bunch of other
Is
stuff.
she gonna steal all your money?
Okay, but you're thinking punitively. And punitive means you're thinking about the bad things that would happen to you. So if you were to cheat on someone you dearly loved, you're thinking divorce, she's going to run out and get. But there's something deeper that's going to happen to that other person. What are you going to do to that other person?
She's gonna sad.
She
Say
said,
it again, Rise.
Break the heart.
You're going to break their heart. You're going to crush them. You're going to crush their spirit. You know that by breaking the rule, it's going to crush the giver's heart. Now, and obviously, if you love someone, you don't want to break their heart. You respect them, you honor them, you care for them. And when it comes to our relationship with God, this is the one we want to be doing. But the problem is, our hearts aren't set to that default. Our hearts don't come ready-made to do this. I mean, honestly, even when it comes to our parents, I mean, when it came to breaking your parents' rules, why do you break their rules?
You might not like them.
You don't like them. And why don't you like them?
Cause they don't give you no freedom.
Cause you don't like them.
You don't like them because it's not what I want to do. You're right back to being what?
Self-conscious.
Self-centered. You're right back to being self-centered. And most of the time when we break the rules, it is self-centered. And the reason when we break the rules, we're being self-centered, and the reason that we actually follow the rules is because of the second one.
Number 2.
Why do you follow the rules when you're self-centered?
Cause
Because you
you
don't-
feel like the person.
You're scared of punishment.
You don't feel, I mean,
It's the right thing to do.
No, if you're self-centered,
if
if you're self-centered and you want to actually break the rules, and you don't actually want to follow them, why then would you follow them anyways?
You don't want to get in
because
trouble.
it's the
Oh, you don't want
I
to get
already
in
said
trouble.
that.
No, you
I'm
did.
sorry, I didn't hear it.
I'm
I'm
sorry,
sorry, I
Brandon,
didn't
but
hear it right.
you said it in your head and I said it out loud.
I said,
That's the
you're
word that
afraid.
I'm going to use for you. Fear. You're afraid. Okay, speed limit on I-10 is what?
like 70,
5.
That's just a
75.
suggestion.
There you go. It's just a suggestion. Why is it just a suggestion?
Because sometimes there's a cop from another county, and if he's in another county, you can go behind him and go over that speed limit, and he can't stop you.
Because you have no what?
Rules.
You have no fear.
Oh,
I mean, he's in a
You're not
different
And if
county.
you don't see a cop, if you don't see a DPS, if you don't see a sheriff's deputy from that particular county,
you haul.
Yeah, I saw
you can do what you want,
You
right?
do whatever you want.
want.
Now, what happens on a highway when there's a DPS officer driving down it?
You
You
go
can't take
under
it.
the
You
speed
go
limit.
twice as fast.
Everybody stacks up behind it.
Why do they stack
There's
up
like a
behind you?
traffic. Why indeed do they
They
stack
don't
up
wanna
behind
get
you?
in trouble.
Because they don't want to get a ticket. If they go busting around him at 85 miles an hour, what is it going to happen?
No, but on the highway there's more than one lane.
It's rated.
I know. Generally, yeah, but most folks are terrified. They don't want to get a ticket. They know it's going to cost them an insurance. They know they may have to pay fines
Can
and
you
stuff
draw
like
it?
that.
Can you draw a cop car?
Oh God, no.
I don't get it. How is it a suggestion
A
if you
box
get
with
punished?
4 cars.
Well, but it's not. It's a suggestion if you don't think you're going to get caught.
I don't ever.
If you don't think you're going to get caught, it ends up being a suggestion, but you are breaking the law.
And
are
then you
you
get
not?
caught, and then you're sad, and then you have to pay $100
My bad.
I
I was
jumped off
in
before
here.
she saw me.
Most of the time, when we follow the rules,
we don't get in
we are
trouble.
right here.
No.
We do it out of fear. We do it because we are trying to avoid punishment, or we think we're going to get some reward for it. It is a self-centered way of following the law.
So you're saying that we shouldn't follow the law?
No, I'm saying we should follow the law, but there's a very different reason we should follow it. We should follow it with this kind of motivation. We should follow it because we want to please the one who gave the law to us. But the problem is, our hearts are not geared that way. Our hearts are self-centered. We like doing things our own way. We test the boundaries. And so even simply, let's pick a commandment, one of the ones you think you know. What commandments?
You shall have
No,
no
I
Steal.
got her.
You shall not do what?
Murder.
commit adultery.
Commit adultery. Alright, we'll do that.
Oh, he doesn't
That's
even know
number
what that
6.
means.
Wait.
You shall not steal.
You
You
shall
shall
not
not
murder.
kill. You shall
Let me
not
not- let me
have
write a little better.
Murder, not kill.
Do not
My bad.
commit adultery.
You shall not steal.
Now, do not commit adultery. That's what it's written. Do not have sexual relations with a member of the opposite sex or a member of the same sex outside of the boundaries of marriage. That's adultery. How many of you have committed it? I haven't either. Okay, you know, the only one I've ever been with is my wife.
Dating Emily.
But okay, here's the deal. Here's the deal. Strictly defined, probably none of us have done that. But here's what Jesus says. Jesus says, look, adultery is a product of lust. Lust is a motivation of the heart, a deep down desire to have another person. Which is why Jesus says, okay, the letter of the law says, okay, you don't, commit adultery, you don't sleep with another person. But Jesus says, look, the primary motivation for that is lust, which is a condition of the heart. Your heart is self-centered. Therefore, if you even look with lust at another person, you have committed adultery. Now, how many of you are guilty of that?
Hey.
Honestly,
I know some.
Me?
I'm raising my hand. I mean, nobody escapes it. No one escapes it. It's a heart condition. And the question then becomes, okay, if we were to follow the law, if we were to do everything that the law commanded, we would be safe. We would be inside the boundaries. Everything would be good. However, our hearts are not set that way. We will push the boundaries. We will try to get out of them because our hearts aren't right. And the law will not change a heart. The law will not change a heart. It can't. Yes.
There was a show the other day on, and it was like stuff in the world like can happen. I don't know. It was just on, and I saw it. And this guy, he had like 9 different wives.
What the? That is adultery.
He's crazy.
Huh? His place.
I have enough difficulty keeping up with one wife. 9 is too many.
What's her name again?
Donna.
Alright. Why can't the law change a heart?
I don't know.
Why can't the law change a heart? Why can't, if I get up here and tell you, love your neighbor as you love yourself, does that change your heart?
Nope.
No, it just tells you what to do.
You can't change your heart.
How does a heart change? That's the ultimate question. That's going to get us to the gospel. And we will begin talking about that, I think, a little bit more next time. How does a heart change?
It beats.
We are done for tonight. Are there any other questions, comments, anything?
Knock my stuff over. Knock my stuff over. Oh my